In the Midwest, near where I live, there are many abandoned places. During my senior year of high school, my friends and I often explored these eerie spots for fun. One Memorial Day weekend, with school almost over, we decided to visit a place we'd heard a lot about, a semi-ghost town called Cairo. Cairo, built in the late 1800s, declined due to flooding and racial tensions, leaving most of it deserted for decades. Intrigued by stories from others, we set out on a Sunday evening. Tristan picked me and Ryan up, and we drove 2 hours south to Cairo, passing through vast farmlands with few towns around. Entering Cairo's road felt unsettling. It was pitch black and abandoned, except for distant lights from a few occupied houses. We parked next to an old brick building labeled liquor and stepped out, feeling the wind rustling through the deserted streets. Ryan led the way down the road. On one side, wooden homes reclaimed by nature stood among vines, while on the other, old shops lined up. One particular building caught our attention, a weathered theater with a sign that said Gem, complete with a ticket booth beside it. Curious, we used our flashlights to enter through a window. Inside, it was dark and musty, with our feeble flashlights barely illuminating the debris-covered floor. As we explored, Ryan suddenly froze, claiming he heard a footstep from above. Tristan and I listened, but heard nothing, attributing it to the building's creaks. We continued upstairs to the balcony where rows of seats faced a stage below. Midway through the chairs, a creak behind us made us whirl around. In the shadows, a disheveled man emerged, holding a small revolver and staring directly at us. The silence amplified our fear. Tristan bolted downstairs, leaving me and Ryan to calmly inform the man we were leaving. He remained silent and motionless as we retreated, then sprinted back to the car. The drive back was tense, none of us speaking until we reached safety. Reflecting on the encounter, I speculated the man once lived in Cairo and, as it declined, ended up hiding in its abandoned buildings. That night could have ended much worse, but we were fortunate to escape unharmed. Since then, we've avoided exploring such places, mindful of the dangers hidden within abandoned memories of Cairo. About 10 months ago, I was hanging out with my college buddy Chris in his small hometown. We were having a blast, hitting up the local bars and just enjoying ourselves. On my last night there, Chris mentioned this place he wanted to check out, a rundown spot in the woods, some abandoned houses or something. Now, Chris and I used to be big into exploring back in college, so it sounded cool to me. Within 30 minutes, we were trekking through this path in the woods, just before sundown. We had our headlamps handy, just in case. After about 20 minutes, the trail ended, and we had to follow this faint footpath through the trees for another hour. Finally, we saw a cluster of houses in the distance. They weren't as decrepit as we expected, though. They looked weathered, but had modern siding and stuff. There was even a gravel road leading to each house. It seemed like they were meant to be a community, but something went south. Graffiti covered the sides of the houses, showing others had been here before us. Chris and I approached the nearest house, peering through the open doorway. Weeds were sprouting through the floorboards, but otherwise, it was empty. Then, out of nowhere, there was this loud slam that echoed through the woods. We both jumped, scanning the gravel road where we thought it came from. After that, dead silence. We were spooked, but shrugged it off and stepped inside. There wasn't much to see downstairs, just the remnants of what might have been a nice home. Upstairs, though, it got weird. It was darker than it should have been, like the windows weren't letting in any light. The hallway was short with only 2 doors and what looked like an attic. We went to the first door, opened it, and found another empty room. But then, we heard footsteps outside shuffling through the grass, getting closer to the house. We froze, listening as whoever it was approached. They came right up to the front door and stopped. "Hello," a shaky voice called out. "I just want to talk, no harm at all." The voice was raspy, like the guy was missing teeth or something. We stayed quiet, wondering why he was approaching us out here. After what felt like forever, the silence was eerie. Chris cautiously went downstairs, peeking out the front door. His face went pale, "There's nobody there," he whispered urgently. I hurried down to see for myself, and he was right, no one in sight. We exchanged a look, both realizing the guy must have been hiding inside the house. Without a word, we bolted for the trees, racing back to Chris's place as fast as we could. Who that guy was and what he wanted, we had no clue. But one thing was certain: if he'd found us, we might not be here to tell the tale. My ex-husband and I used to love going into old abandoned houses years ago. There was a beautiful old two-story brick home about a mile from where we lived. The grass and trees were so grown and tall, it was hard even getting to the house. My ex managed to get a window open and we climbed through it. It was like a time capsule. Very nice and expensive furniture and stuff everywhere. Furniture was covered with really dusty sheets. Everything looked high quality and expensive. Even the wallpaper was rich. It was creepy how it seemed like they walked away from all of it in the 1950s or 60s. The kitchen was upstairs, which was odd. But we ventured up there, and there was a huge arch opening into a gentleman's type man cave. Again, lots of expensive furniture and stuff. I stood in the archway while my ex rummaged through stuff. Off to the side of the arch was a huge mirror leaning against the wall. I used it to check my hair for spider webs. Took maybe 3 steps away from the mirror to tell my ex I wanted to go. It literally felt like someone was standing beside me. Took the 3 steps back to the mirror, and in bright pink lipstick were the words, "Get out." I swear on my life and the lives of my children, it was right there, and it hadn't been 2 minutes before. The mirror was only a few feet behind me the entire time, and I definitely would have seen "Get out" in bright pink lipstick a minute before. I even remember the exact shade of lipstick too. It was the kind old ladies like to wear. Well, I screamed and jumped back into a kitchen table and fell. My ex comes running over, and I am so scared I just point to the mirror babbling like an idiot. My ex calmly got me out of there, and we never went back. He thinks I didn't notice it before, but I was all up on that mirror, so I would have absolutely noticed bright pink lipstick in the middle of it. Get cold hills every time I think about it. We couldn't find a way in, and all the door entrances were locked, boarded off, and guarded by cameras. Finally, we found an old busted window that led to what once was the kitchen. After some quick thinking, we found an old chair and hopped in. The place was super dark, wet and cold, and as soon as I set foot down, I got the chill down my spine, as if something was there or somebody or something was watching me. My friend, who was a lot less shaken, wanted to go look around. I started snapping pics of things that were broken or flipped over. My friend walks down a hallway with the words "All who enter die" written on the wall. I did not follow, but between being spooked and taking the pics, I just wasn't ready to take that step yet. My friend, who was a lot less shaken, wanted to go look around. I started snapping pics of things that were broken or flipped over. My friend walks down a hallway with the words "All who enter die" written on the wall. I did not follow, but between being spooked and taking the pics, I just wasn't ready to take that step yet. It wasn't 30 seconds later, my friend comes speeding back in the room looking frightened, but trying to keep himself calm, and said, "All right, I've seen enough, let's go." "Now," I said, "what happened? Did you see something?" He didn't say a word, but walked past me and started climbing back out the window we came in. I was close to the hallway, and I guess my nature curiosity kicked in, so I leaned over and peeked down the hallway. At the end of the hallway was an empty chair. Something small was in the chair, looked like a ball or something. And the next thing I know, it slid off the chair and landed on the floor. I was totally freaked out. I screamed, "Oh hell no," and ran for the window. My friend was waiting on the other side, so I threw him my camera and I leapfrogged out the window, cutting up my hands in the progress, but not really caring about it. We ran back to the car, got in, and speed away. It wasn't until a few minutes and a few miles later we finally calmed down enough to talk to each other about what happened. I said, "Did you see that ball in the chair?" When I looked down the hallway, I saw something in that chair, and then it fall to the floor. My friend looked at me with shock and disbelief in his eyes and said it wasn't a ball. I was walking down the hallway peeking into the empty rooms, and it was creepy seeing the flipped over beds and stuff scattered everywhere. But when I got closer to the end of the hallway, what looked like an empty chair, a small doll sitting there. I thought it was spooky, but probably some crackhead put it there. And as soon as I thought that, the doll went from sitting up to laying over. So I ran out of there. I thought I might have overreacted, and maybe it was a breeze or something that knocked it over, but once you said it got knocked to the ground, I knew it could have been a breeze, and that totally freaked me out. So yeah, I know it doesn't sound very scary, but you had to been there. With the combination of cold and chills, and how quiet and secluded it was, just made a perfect condition, so be scared more than I ever have before. About 8 years ago, I lived in a town in the mountains that had a lot of vacant and abandoned houses. I had gone into 2 of them. The first one I went into honestly scared me. It was off a stone road with a few other houses scattered down the road. My boyfriend at the time and I drove there, even though it was less than a mile from where we lived. It had snowed a lot, and there was probably a good 8 inches of snow on that lot. The house was set back from the road and had a long driveway. The first weird thing was there were appliances, stoves, washers, dryers, refrigerators, just lining the driveway on either side. The house itself was a big house and a split-level front door. When you go in, you can go up the few steps to the main area or down the few steps to the bottom level. There were no steps to get into the front door, so we went to the side. The door was already kicked in and snow blowing to the inside. The house was completely gutted. We went in, and there were those really tall Jesus candles you can get from like the dollar store lining the hallway on both sides, had to be close to 100 in total, and went up the stairs to the front door, continued up the other steps, and stopped in front of a door a little to the right of the kitchen, which was at the top of the steps. There was heavy plastic like layers. It was thick, acting as a door, so we couldn't see in the room. We decided to go check it out, so we pushed the plastic aside to go in. The room was small, and there was a small folding table set up in the middle of the room with 1 chair, 1 plate on the table, 1 fork, 1 spoon, and 1 cup knocked over. The room's air felt very heavy, as if whoever was there or their last was very depressed and sad, and maybe even took their life there, but no signs of that. There was no other furniture in the room. There was closet door that was ajar, but we heard a noise come from behind it. Thinking it was an animal or something, we opened the door, and there was a black top head on a hook and nothing else. I started to get anxiety really bad, and the heaviness of the air was getting to me. We walked out of the room through the heavy plastic, and I stopped at the top of the steps as my ex wanted to go down the hall, but I was getting too creeped out. I told him to hurry up. He was maybe 10 steps down the hall when the plastic from the doorway flew open, and I felt this big forceful rush of air go past me and down the steps. It almost knocked me over. My ex heard the plastic move and ran toward me. Pretty much picked me up. I'm not a skinny person, and we ran down the steps and out the door back to my car. It was terrifying. That plastic could not have moved on its own. The other house I was in was not scary at all. It was almost comforting. The small house had been vacant for a long time, and the roof was collapsing in. We went in through the front door, and it was like whoever once lived there just left one day and never came back. I'm assuming it was an elderly person who died, and no one came to empty the house. Everything was still there. Medicine in the bathroom that expired in 1994. Dishes were on a drying rack next to sink. Wallet with ID. Dentures, just everything. It was sad. We checked out the home and found tons of cool stuff, especially an old WW1 or W2 uniform, an old sewing machine, record player with tons of records, and this old parchment paper book of records dating back to the 1890s with railroad information and costs of materials and letters between family and friends and business transactions. It was super cool to see that. We didn't take anything, but it was neat to feel like we stepped back in time. I moved out of that area and a couple years ago went to drive by that house, but it's not there anymore.